All right, so what's going on, everybody? So I want to give you guys an update from a financial perspective. I've been talking about how God is exposing a lot of the underlying facade, the house of cards, and many financial wickedness that's happening in this generation. And a lot of that will lead to the end times financial beast system. And a lot of what's going on these days is all digital. It's all online. And these are things that from previous times, you don't have a tangible asset like a piece of gold to be able to do your transactions with. And so I want to give you guys some updates and how these things are impacting you. And as I've said before, that you have to be in a position in this time period to protect your wealth and to be very cautious on how to move forward, because there's a lot of information coming out. There's a lot of things that God is exposing and bringing to light. And we are in a time now, which, as I've been saying, and as many economists and people are predicting, is that there's going to be a crash. There's going to be a recession, a depression, whatever you want to call it. And to some degree of severity, people are disagreeing on. But the fact remains is that there's a lot of things happening behind closed doors and now into the public light, for which you can see the sensitivity for which a small piece of news, a small bit of information is causing a lot of the leverage, a lot of the markets to go one way in extreme. And for this particular piece of news, especially with the FTX that has occurred this past week, it is absolutely crazy. And so I'm going to talk about that, as well as some other things with Twitter, the pharmaceutical companies, and many other things that are happening right now. And so all of this is a bigger part of unveiling and showing basically what's been going on as in terms of fraud, in terms of just the fact that there is all this nefarious activity going on, and the real asset, the collateral, the amount of wealth that people are having or purporting to have is not as what everybody is thinking is true. And so with FTX, the basic story this week is that this guy, the CTO or CEO and founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, who also owns this hedge fund, Alameda Research, basically their financials were leaked, and the relationship between Alameda and FTX was basically shown as being nefarious and questionable. And FTX has their own exchange token, the FTT token, and it gave owners the access to be able to trade with lower fees. It didn't necessarily represent ownership, but it gave them access, similar to how loyalty points can be redeemed for things. And so basically $6 billion out of the $12 billion in assets that Alameda had on their books were in these FTT tokens. And so even though that isn't necessarily an issue in and of itself, but if anything were to happen with the FTT tokens, then they may not be able to sell these tokens to be able to cover their debts and convert it to actual dollars in cash. Alameda basically used $6 billion of this FTT token to use as collateral to get loans from real customer deposits. And so this is a very slippery slope, because they would be putting up these essentially loyalty points tokens to get real money to trade with. Basically, CZ, the founder of Binance, in the early days when he invested in FTX, basically took $2 billion of the FTT token. And there was some drama, and CZ tweeted that he would sell all of his $2 billion stake, which led to the crash of this price. And so this is simply just tweets, right? And so because of that, there's just basically the spiral that happened. The $6 billion that Alameda had quickly became worthless. And there was some back and forth about Alameda trying to be bought out by CZ. They went through with it, but then eventually backed out. And so overnight, FTX and Alameda quickly became worthless. And so all of the underlying value of the loans that they borrowed could not be paid back. And so all of these companies, I think 130 some companies, have now become bankrupt. And FTX further exacerbated the issue by pausing withdrawals, and this spiral effect of panic ensued. And so again, if this is confusing to you, it's okay. But the point is that because there was a centralized exchange and power, what they did with pausing withdrawals, what they did with this sort of circle effect of how they're using collateral and assets to back certain things, to use it as leverage, to buy and use for loans and many other things, all of this had collapsed on this company, FTX. And so now they're basically bankrupt, or they're filing for bankruptcy, and all of these customers' money is just basically worthless. And so why is this important? It's because this is one of the first publicly acknowledge issues of what's basically this house of cards. And if you think about it, there's a lot of banks, there's a lot of people short selling, having empty IOUs, assets that seem like they're worth something are actually worthless, and they're being used multiple times over as collateral or leverage for other things. And this entire propped up market that we're living in, it's being exposed and it's being shown because for so long with inflation, with the monetary and the centralized banking systems and all of this stuff that's been happening behind closed doors with the stock market and many other things, all of these things is basically a show. A lot of people don't really realize it, but a lot of the money that you have tied up in certain markets, certain assets, all of these things are quite frankly worthless because it's being multiplied many times over as being used in this area and that area, certain loans and whatever. That's basically the issue with the fractional reserve system in the banking system. So if you try to take out money, right, there's probably, I think it's like a 10-to-1 ratio. If you take out that money, they're using that amount of cash 10 times over for other things. And so that's why if you have a bank run, that's why if people are trying to pull out money, it's going to spiral out of control. And so we're seeing that with the FTX as it's happening right now, this past week. And so what you've got to understand in this time is that, as I've been warning people before, get ready for bigger things to come, for crashes, many things. People talk about the Great Reset. People are talking about just showcasing what it is that is basically this facade, this house of cards that we are living in with the entire Federal Reserve System, the central banking system, and all these different things. And all of this is paving the way for evil to come in to say, hey, we need to control your assets even more. Hey, you need to be on this financial system and you have to be in this central bank digital currency and many other things for which people want to have centralized power over. People are trying to remove themselves from a asset-backed currency, like a gold-backed currency. And all these different things is causing many problems. And I believe we're in a season now as things are being exposed, as a lot of things are crashing. If you're not in a place for which you are monitoring your finances, you're protecting it, you're in a place for which you have cash on hand, you have hard assets, you have things for which you can easily retrieve your equity of different things, then you are in trouble. Because a lot of people that were in FTX, that were in, and again, this is not a scare with crypto, right? If you have crypto, make sure you have it in a cold storage, like a USB, sort of like one of those Ledger Nano things or whatever it is, to have the actual crypto that you own on hand. You don't want to have it in a place for which it can get hacked, for which it can be stolen, or in this instance where it could just be wiped out, right? The same goes for cash in your bank. When banks crash and you can't pull your money out, then that's it, right? The same goes for any digital sort of currency for which you can place your assets in something. So I've been saying this before, guys, but be ready as the Lord leads you in how to steward your wealth, how to take your money and put it in places for which you can easily have access to, that you can easily manage it. Be in a place for which that, however the Lord leads, that you are at peace and that you can use and you can steward this money right and correctly. Otherwise, a lot of these things are going to just be worthless. And the other thing I want to mention is that you've got to be very careful who you listen to as a person of authority. We're seeing this all over the place, from news, the mainstream media. I've talked about people that have a title and they're saying, hey, I have the authority and I want to tell you the right information. We're seeing even this past week, if you haven't heard, Twitter, with all of the things going on with the verification, there's a lot of people that have been imposters trying to portray other companies. And so one was Eli Lilly and some pharmaceutical companies. Basically, this account that was an imposter came out and said that, hey, insulin was free, and basically tanked the price, the stock price of Eli Lilly, like in a single day by some 5% or whatever it was. Point being that people that claim to know something, we saw this with COVID, we saw this with the vaccines and many other things, they came from a place of authority. They came from a place that told you, hey, I know something, this is the truth. But yet, because people did not discern, because people did not take a second to assess the situation, they reacted too quickly and they unfortunately paid the price. And so a lot of people, they're reacting too quickly to news, reacting too quickly to people that claim to have authority. The same goes for anybody that's the mainstream media. I've talked about how they are the false prophets of this generation. A lot of people that claim to know something, but they are being fake. So this is not some attack on Twitter Blue and what he's doing, but it's exposing this idea of who has authority, who has information, what is misinformation, and showcasing to you that you've got to be very discerning in this time. So I just wanted to give you guys this update from a financial perspective. More exposure is coming. A lot of things in the financial realm. I talked about the wealth transfer. I've talked about many topics for which God is exposing and showcasing so that Christians, so that people, men and women of faith, can be more educated and we can steward what God has given us in this time in a better way. So God bless you guys. More to come. Love you guys. Talk to you guys very soon.